The galaxy was vast, filled with countless stars, planets, and species. Some were thriving, while others, like the Zorethians, had fallen into ruin. The Zorethians were an ancient and proud alien race, once known for their advanced technology and powerful empire. But now, their world, Zorath, was under siege by the Tyrak, a brutal and merciless alien species that seemed unstoppable. The Zorethians had tried everything. They fought bravely, using every weapon and strategy in their vast arsenal. But no matter what they did, the Tyrak kept coming, stronger and more numerous with each passing day. Zorath's cities were crumbling, its people were dying, and the once proud empire was on the edge of complete destruction. In their final moments of desperation, the Zorethians did something they had never done before. They sent a distress signal to the galaxy, asking for help. They had no expectation of a response. Over the years, the galaxy had grown indifferent to their plight. Many races saw the Zorethians as a lost cause, unworthy of aid. The Zorethians had been abandoned by their allies long ago, left to fend for themselves as their empire crumbled around them. Yet, as the signal echoed across the galaxy, there was one fleet that heard it, a fleet that had not turned its back on those in need, a fleet from Earth, the human fleet. Captain Amelia Burke stood on the bridge of the human flagship, the Hope's Flame. She had been given command of this mission, one that seemed impossible. Humanity had come a long way in a short amount of time, but even they knew they were outmatched. Their fleet was small compared to the Tyraks, and their technology was not as advanced as the aliens they were about to face. But they had something the Tyrak didn't: determination. When the distress signal came through, the human high command had debated whether to answer it. Some argued that humanity should focus on its own problems. Others feared the Tyrak might turn their attention to Earth next. But Captain Burke had insisted. She believed that the human spirit, unbroken and unwavering, could make a difference. She believed that if humanity stood by the Zorethians, they could turn the tide of the war. "Set course for Zorath," Captain Burke ordered, her voice steady but filled with a sense of urgency. "All hands, prepare for battle." The crew of the Hope's Flame sprang into action, each member knowing the weight of the mission ahead. They weren't just going to Zorath to fight. They were going to try and save a whole species. The Zorethians, desperate for help, had called out to the galaxy, and it was humanity's turn to answer. As they neared the Zorethian system, the sight that greeted them was devastating. Zorath was barely recognizable. What had once been a beautiful, lush planet was now a wasteland. Smoke billowed from its cities, and the surface was scared by massive explosions. The Tyrak ships hovered above, their intimidating forms casting long shadows over the planet. It was clear that the Tyrak had no plans of stopping until they had wiped out every last Zorethian. Captain Burke's heart tightened as she gazed at the destruction. But there was no time to mourn. The mission had just begun. "All fighters, launch," Burke commanded. "We're not letting them destroy everything. We're here to help the Zorethians fight back." The human fleet moved swiftly into the system, positioning itself between the Tyrak ships and the planet. The Tyrak, surprised by the sudden appearance of a new enemy, turned their attention to the humans. They weren't expecting this. No one had ever dared challenge their dominance before. But the humans, led by Captain Burke, were not intimidated. "Open fire," she ordered. The Hope's Flame unleashed its weapons, firing on the Tyrak ships in a calculated strike. The smaller human vessels followed suit, engaging the enemy with precision. The Tyrak retaliated with overwhelming force, but the human ships, despite their smaller size, were nimble and quick, dodging blasts and countering with fierce attacks. It was a battle of tactics, strategy, and raw determination. As the battle raged, Captain Burke's thoughts were not just on the fight at hand. She knew that this battle was only the beginning. The humans had come to Zorath not just to defend a planet, but to form an alliance with the Zorethians. The fate of both their races was now intertwined. On the surface of Zorath, The Zorathian people watched as the human fleet engaged the Tyrak. Hope, a feeling they had long since given up on, began to flicker in their hearts. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was still a chance for survival. But Captain Burke knew this wouldn't be easy. The Tyrak were relentless, and the road ahead was uncertain. But she was certain of one thing. Humanity would fight with everything it had. It was what they did best. And in this fight, their determination, their courage, would be the key to saving not just the Zorathians, but themselves as well. The battle for Zorath had begun. The battle raged on in space as Captain Amelia Burke and her crew fought with all their might against the Tyrak. The human fleet had made its presence known, but they were still outnumbered, and the Tyrak were proving to be a difficult enemy to defeat. On the ground, the situation was even more dire. The Zorathian cities had been reduced to rubble, their once thriving society now hanging on by a thread. But something had changed. As the human fleet continued to push back the Tyrak in orbit, the Zorathians began to take notice. They watched, amazed, as the humans fought with fierce determination. It wasn't just their advanced technology or their strategy that impressed the Zorathians. It was their sheer will to fight for a cause greater than themselves. The humans were not just here to save their own people. They were here to save a lost race, a race that had been abandoned by the rest of the galaxy. Captain Burke knew that the Tyrak were only part of the problem. While the battle in space was crucial, the real challenge lay in convincing the Zorathians to trust the humans. For years they had been alone, fighting a losing battle with no one to turn to for help. It wasn't easy for the Zorathians to accept that the humans, a species they had never encountered before, were now their only hope. After the battle subsided, Captain Burke and her officers descended to the surface of Zorath. The planet's once beautiful cities were now nothing more than ghost towns. Buildings were reduced to piles of rubble, and the air was thick with smoke. The Tyrak's destruction had left a scar on the planet, one that might never fully heal. The humans, though, were here to offer more than just a weapon. They were offering hope. As they approached the Zorathian command center, Captain Burke was met by their leader, High Commander Tyra. The Zorathian commander was a tall, regal figure, her face a mix of anger and weariness. Her people had been through so much, and yet she still stood strong, determined to protect what little remained of their civilization. She had heard of the humans' arrival, but she was hesitant to trust them. After all, why should she place her faith in a species that had never shown any interest in the Zorathians before? "We didn't ask for your help," High Commander Tellera said bluntly, her voice steady but tinged with frustration. "Our people have fought alone for centuries. Why should we trust you now?" Captain Burke met her gaze without hesitation. "I understand your doubts, but we're not here to take anything from you. We're here to help, and we won't leave until we've done everything we can to ensure your survival." The words were simple, but they carried weight. The Zorathians had heard many promises in the past, only to be abandoned when things got tough. But something about Captain Burke's sincerity, her unwavering confidence in the face of the enemy, struck a chord with High Commander Tyra. She saw that the humans were not like the other races that had turned their backs on the Zorathians. These humans, for better or worse, had come all the way to the edge of the galaxy to help. They were offering more than just weapons. They were offering a chance at survival. "We'll need more than just your ships," Tyra said after a long pause, her tone softening. "We need knowledge. We need to rebuild, and we need allies, not just soldiers. We've lost so much, and we cannot afford to waste any more time." Captain Burke nodded. "I understand. And that's why we're here. We don't just want to fight. We want to work together, share our knowledge, and rebuild what's been lost. We've fought our own battles, and we know what it means to stand alone. But now, we're here for you." For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the Zorathian commander allowed herself to hope. The alliance between the humans and Zorathians wasn't just a matter of survival. It was a new beginning. It was a chance for both races to learn from each other, to grow stronger together. The Tyrak may have believed they had already won, but they didn't know the strength that lay in unity. The combined forces of humanity and the Zorathians would make them a formidable force. As the discussions continued, Captain Burke's officers began to work alongside the Zorathian engineers, exchanging ideas and strategies for rebuilding the planet's defenses. The Zorathians, though initially cautious, were quickly impressed by the humans' ingenuity. They had technology that the Zorathians had never seen before, tools that could turn the tide of war. But more than that, the humans had something else: the ability to think outside the box, to adapt to new situations in ways that the Zorathians hadn't considered. By the end of the day, the first steps toward a new alliance were firmly in place. The Zorathians had agreed to work with the humans, sharing their knowledge of Zorathian technology and culture in exchange for human expertise in strategy and warfare. It was an alliance born of necessity, but one that would grow into something much stronger. As the sun set on the war-torn planet, Captain Burke stood beside High Commander Tyra, watching the horizon. There was still much work to be done, but for the first time in years, there was hope. Together, humanity and the Zorathians would fight back against the Tyrak, and they would win. They were no longer alone. In the weeks following the formation of their alliance, the human and Zorathian forces began to work together in ways neither side had ever imagined. It wasn't just about sharing weapons or technologies. It was about building trust, understanding each other's cultures, and creating a bond that went beyond mere survival. As the Tyrak continued their brutal assault on Zorath, the humans knew that every day they spent preparing was crucial. The time for defense was running out. The Tyrak were growing stronger. On the surface of Zorath, the once abandoned cities began to show signs of life. The Zorathian engineers, now working side by side with human experts, had begun rebuilding their planet's defenses. The once dilapidated buildings now housed workshops and laboratories, where humans and Zorathians collaborated on new weapons, shields, and strategies. The Zorathians, with their deep knowledge of the planet's terrain, helped the humans understand how best to use Zorath's natural resources. In turn, the humans taught them how to integrate advanced technologies into their defenses, creating new tools that neither side could have developed alone. Captain Burke watched it all unfold with a sense of pride. It wasn't just the technological advancements that amazed her. It was the sheer determination of both sides. The Zorathians, who had once stood alone, now worked alongside the humans like they were old allies. And the humans, with their relentless drive and unwavering commitment, had brought a new energy to the Zorathian people. But there was still much to be done. Despite the progress, the Tyrak had not given up their campaign against Zorath. They were relentless, and every attempt the humans and Zorathians made to improve their defenses was met with counterattacks. The Tyrak had no intention of letting their prey escape. As Captain Burke walked through the makeshift command center, she could see the tension in the faces of her crew. Every day, the Tyrak advanced closer to Zorath's capital city. The battle had shifted from space to the planet itself. If the Tyrak managed to break through the defenses on the ground, it wouldn't matter how many ships the humans had in orbit. Zorath would fall. Captain, Lieutenant Harrow, her chief strategist, said, looking up from a holographic map, "The Tyrak fleet is preparing for another assault. They're massing near the equator. It looks like they're going to launch an all-out attack on our new defensive line." Captain Burke nodded, her face hardening with resolve. "We knew this day would come," she said. "Prepare the fleet. We can't let them breach our defenses. We'll need to take them by surprise." The plan was simple but risky. The human fleet, now augmented with Zorathian ships, would move in to intercept the Tyrak fleet before they could attack the defensive line. With the element of surprise on their side, they hoped to cripple the Tyrak fleet before they could launch their ground assault. It was a bold move, but Captain Burke had learned that sometimes the only way to survive was to take the fight to the enemy. In the days leading up to the battle, the humans and Zorathians worked tirelessly to perfect their strategy. The Zorathians had their own ships, but they lacked the agility and firepower of the Tyrak. The humans, however, had small, fast vessels that were perfect for quick strikes. The combined fleet would be faster, more maneuverable, and harder to hit. It was a gamble, but they had no other choice. As the fleet prepared to launch, Captain Burke stood at the helm of the Hope's Flame, watching the Zorethian sky. The battle would be fought not just with weapons, but with determination. Both sides had suffered too much to lose now. "Captain," Lieutenant Harrow called again. "The fleet is ready. We're just waiting for your signal." Captain Burke took a deep breath and looked out across the stars. She could see the Tyrak ships approaching, their dark silhouettes against the backdrop of Zoreth's moon. It was a sight that made her heart race, but it also steeled her resolve. There was no turning back now. "All right," she said, her voice steady. "Launch the fleet." The ships of the human Zorethian alliance moved into position. The Tyrak had no idea what was coming. They had expected an easy victory, but they were about to face a force unlike any they had encountered before. As the human and Zorethian ships cut through space, it was clear that this battle would be a turning point in the war. On the surface of Zoreth, High Commander Tyra stood on the balcony of the command center, watching the sky. The Tyrek fleet was visible now, but she knew the humans had a plan. It was their last chance. She could only hope that the trust they had built would be enough to turn the tide. If the humans succeeded, it would be a victory for both their peoples. But if they failed, the thought was too terrible to consider. The battle began with a deafening roar as the human and Zorethian fleets launched their first wave of attacks. The Tyrek ships, caught off guard, were slow to respond. It was the opening the humans had been waiting for. With lightning-fast strikes, they began to tear through the Tyrek fleet, their agility and speed proving to be their greatest advantage. But the Tyrek were not easily defeated. As the humans fought to hold the line, the Tyrek retaliated with ferocity. The battle for Zoreth had truly begun. The war for Zoreth was now in full swing. The skies above the planet were filled with flashing lights as the human and Zorethian fleets engaged the Tyrek in fierce combat. The Tyrek, caught off guard by the surprise attack, fought back with everything they had. Their ships, large and heavily armed, were formidable opponents, but they were not prepared for the speed and maneuverability of the human vessels. The battle raged on, with explosions lighting up the darkness of space and ships crashing in fiery displays of destruction. Captain Burke stood at the command console aboard the Hope's Flame, her face tense with concentration as she watched the battle unfold. Her heart raced with each passing second. This was the moment they had been preparing for, and it was all coming down to whether or not their strategy would succeed. She could hear the crackling of voices over the comms, each one focused on their duties, each one determined to see this through. "Captain," Lieutenant Harrow's voice came through the comms. "The Tyrek are regrouping. They're bringing in reinforcements from their hidden bases in the outer system. We need to act fast." Captain Burke's jaw tightened. The Tyrek were a relentless enemy. They had no intention of backing down, but the humans and Zorethians had one advantage the Tyrek couldn't match: unity. The alliance between the two species had forged a new strength that the Tyrek were not prepared for. "We can't let them reinforce," Captain Burke said firmly. "We need to split their forces, target their command ships, and take them out first. Disrupt their chain of command, and the rest of the fleet will crumble." "Aye, Captain," Lieutenant Harrow replied. "Sending the order now." The Hope's Flame shifted course, its engines roaring to life as it moved toward the heart of the Tyrek fleet. With calculated precision, the human ships darted through space, avoiding enemy fire as they made their way to the command ships. The Tyrek ships fired relentlessly, but the humans were faster, weaving through the enemy's attacks with expert agility. Meanwhile, on the surface of Zoreth, High Commander Tyra watched from the command center, her gaze fixed on the skies. She could see the flashes of battle above, but she could do little but wait. The fate of her people was now in the hands of the humans. If they could hold the Tyrek back, the Zorethians might have a chance to rebuild. If they failed, the thought was unbearable. She had seen so much destruction already. The city that once stood proud was now a smoldering ruin, the once beautiful landscape marred by the scars of war. But there was something in her heart that refused to give up. She had seen the humans' resolve. They were fighting for more than just victory. They were fighting for the future of both their species. Back in space, the tide of battle was beginning to turn. The human fleet, led by the Hope's Flame, had managed to break through the Tyrak's defensive lines. Their strategy had worked. By targeting the command ships, they had disrupted the Tyrak's coordination, causing confusion among the enemy ranks. Without their leaders, the Tyrak fleet was beginning to fracture. "Captain," Lieutenant Harrow's voice crackled over the comms. "The Tyrak forces are in disarray. We've taken down their command ships. The rest of the fleet is scattered." Captain Burke allowed herself a brief smile. It was a victory, but the battle was far from over. The Tyrak were not easily defeated, and they would regroup. The next phase of the plan was just as crucial. "Good work, Lieutenant," Captain Burke said. "Now we push forward. Don't give them a chance to recover." The human fleet pressed on, continuing their assault on the disorganized Tyrak forces. The Zorethian ships, though not as fast as the human vessels, provided critical support, engaging the remaining Tyrak ships with heavy firepower. It was a unified force, each side bringing its strengths to the battle. On the ground, the Zorethian people watched in awe as the battle above them unfolded. For the first time in years, they saw hope flicker in their hearts. The humans were not only skilled warriors, but they were also relentless in their pursuit of victory. They had brought a new fire to Zoreth, and that fire was spreading. But despite their success, the humans knew that this battle was only one step toward a greater goal. The Tyrak might be weakened, but they were far from defeated. The humans would need to push harder, fight longer, and never give up. This was a fight for survival, and there was no room for hesitation. The final phase of the battle had begun. The Tyrak, now divided and weakened, fought back with desperation. Their forces were smaller, but their fury was undiminished. The humans and Zorethians pressed on, refusing to relent. As the Hope's Flame closed in on the remaining Tyrak ships, Captain Burke's mind raced. She knew that this was a pivotal moment. The humans had to finish what they had started. The Tyrak couldn't be allowed to regroup. The Zorethians needed a chance to rebuild, and that chance could only come if the Tyrak were completely defeated. "We're almost there," Captain Burke said, her voice resolute. "Keep up the pressure. Don't let them regroup." The final push began, the combined forces of humanity and the Zorethians closing in on the last remnants of the Tyrak fleet. It was a fight to the finish, and neither side would give up easily. On Zoreth's surface, High Commander Tyra stood tall, her gaze fixed on the skies above. The fate of her people rested in the hands of the humans. She could only hope that their strength, and the alliance they had forged, would be enough to secure a future for her people. The battle was far from over, but the first steps toward victory had been taken. The final phase of the battle had begun. The Tyrak fleet was scattered and disorganized, but their resolve had not broken. Despite their losses, they were not willing to give up. Captain Burke knew that this was their last chance to deal a decisive blow. If they failed, the Tyrak would regroup, and the war would drag on for much longer. This had to end today. From her command center aboard the Hope's Flame, Captain Burke surveyed the battlefield. The Tyrak were retreating to their last stronghold, a heavily fortified moon on the edge of Zoreth's orbit. It was the perfect place to make a final stand. The moon was surrounded by asteroid fields, making it difficult for any fleet to approach undetected. But the humans had no choice. They had to take the fight to them. "We're moving in," Captain Burke said, her voice calm but filled with determination. "Prepare for a full assault. The Tyrak think they can hide behind the asteroid fields, but we've learned their tactics. We're not giving them any more time." "Aye, Captain," Lieutenant Harrow replied. "We'll be in position in 10 minutes. All ships are ready." The human fleet, now reinforced by Zorethian ships, began to move toward the asteroid fields. The Tyrek fleet was waiting for them, but they were not prepared for the speed and precision of the human vessels. The humans had learned to navigate through asteroid fields with ease, using the terrain to their advantage. They would strike swiftly, before the Tyrek had time to react. On the surface of Zorith, High Commander Tyra stood with her advisors, watching the battle unfold on the large holographic display. She could see the human ships closing in on the Tyrek's last stronghold. There was a sense of hope in her heart, but it was tempered with the knowledge that this battle could still go either way. The Tyrek were fierce, and their forces were still formidable. But she had seen the humans' determination. If anyone could win this battle, it was them. "We must remain patient," Tyra said, her voice steady. "The humans have the strategy. We can only trust that their strength will be enough." The fight in space was a chaotic dance of explosions and laser fire as the human and Zorithian ships maneuvered through the asteroid fields. The Tyrek, despite their overwhelming firepower, were struggling to match the agility of their opponents. The humans, using their advanced technology and tactics, launched a series of quick, precise strikes against the Tyrek fleet. Each hit weakened the enemy, driving them back further into their stronghold. Captain Burke knew that time was running out. The Tyrek were cornered, but they were not going to surrender. The final push would require everything the human fleet had left. She issued the command, and the human fleet moved in for the kill. "All ships, focus fire on their command ship," Captain Burke ordered. "We take that down, and the rest of their fleet will follow." With synchronized precision, the human ships began their final assault on the Tyrek command ship. The Tyrek retaliated fiercely, launching wave after wave of fire at the incoming human fleet. But the humans were prepared. Their ships darted in and out of the asteroid fields, using their speed to avoid enemy fire, while dealing punishing blows to the Tyrek's defenses. The Tyrek fleet, once powerful and organized, was now unraveling. Their command ship was under heavy fire, and the crew was struggling to maintain control. As the human fleet closed in, Captain Burke's thoughts turned to the Zorithians. They had put their faith in the humans, and the humans could not afford to let them down. "We can't stop now," Captain Burke said, her voice tight with resolve. "Not until the job is done." The final battle for the Tyrek command ship was intense. The human ships unleashed everything they had, every missile, every laser, every weapon. The Tyrek ship shook under the barrage, but it refused to go down. The battle seemed endless, each minute stretching on as the humans pushed forward with relentless determination. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, a massive explosion lit up the darkness of space. The Tyrek command ship was no more. The human fleet had done it. With their leadership destroyed, the Tyrek forces began to fall into disarray. The remaining ships had no coordination, no central command to guide them. The Tyrek were defeated. But the battle was not entirely won yet. The remaining Tyrek ships, though weakened, still fought with a savage fury. It would take a little more time to completely dismantle their fleet. As the Tyrek forces retreated, Captain Burke allowed herself a small moment of relief. It was over. The war for Zorith had been won, and the humans had delivered the final blow. She looked at the display, seeing the last Tyrek ships retreating into the distant corners of space. For now, the galaxy was safe. On the surface of Zorith, High Commander Tyra stood with her people, watching as the last of the enemy forces disappeared into the darkness. There was no cheering, no celebration. Instead, there was a profound silence. They had won, yes, but they had lost so much in the process. Still, hope flickered in Tyra's heart. The battle had been fierce, but the alliance between the humans and the Zorithians had proven to be unstoppable. They had come together, fought together, and now they would rebuild together. "The war is over," Tyra said quietly, her voice filled with both sorrow and hope. "But this is only the beginning. Together, we will rebuild." As the humans and Zorithians began to celebrate their hard-won victory, they knew that their future was brighter than ever. They had faced the darkness of war together, and they had emerged victorious. There was much work to be done, but with the strength of their alliance, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. The galaxy was still, silent after the chaos of battle. The war had ended, but the aftermath was far from peaceful. On Zoreth, in the heart of the rebuilt city, High Commander Tyra stood before a crowd of Zorethians and humans. It had been days since the Tyrak forces had been defeated, and yet there was still work to be done. The damage to their planet was immense, but it was nothing compared to the losses they had suffered in the war. Now, it was time to heal. Tyra looked out over the crowd, her gaze moving from the human soldiers to the Zorethian citizens who had come to show their gratitude. The humans had not only fought alongside them, they had shared their strength, their resources, and most importantly, their hope. Without the humans, Zoreth would have fallen. But together, they had defeated an enemy that was far stronger than any single race could have faced alone. Today, we stand united, Tyra began, her voice carrying across the gathered masses. Today, we rebuild not only our cities, but our future. The humans had already begun their work. Captain Burke and her fleet had sent engineers, medics, and supplies, helping to restore what the Tyrak had destroyed. For every bomb that had fallen on Zoreth, a human had worked to repair, to heal, to rebuild. Tyra's heart swelled with gratitude as she watched the interaction between the two species. It was a bond forged in battle, but it would be sustained by the promise of a better future. While the leaders spoke of rebuilding, the rest of the planet was already hard at work. Humans and Zorethians alike collaborated on restoring the damaged cities, clearing debris, and tending to the injured. But it was not just the physical recovery that was needed. The mental and emotional scars of war were much harder to heal. Survivors of both species had lost family, friends, and comrades. Some of the Zorethian children, who had never known peace, clung to their human mentors, finding comfort in the strength and compassion the humans offered. Captain Burke watched from the side, her arms folded across her chest. Her expression was calm, but inside, she was tired. The war had been long, and it had taken its toll on her. She had seen friends fall, witnessed the destruction of entire worlds, and led countless battles. But as she watched the Zorethians and humans working side by side, she felt a sense of accomplishment. This was why they had fought, so that others could have the chance to rebuild, to grow, and to live in peace. Captain Burke, a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Lieutenant Harrow, who had approached with a solemn expression. The Zorethians want to meet with us. They've requested a formal ceremony. Ceremony? Burke raised an eyebrow. For what? They want to honor the humans who fought in the war, Harrow explained. They're calling it a symbol of unity, a pledge for the future. Burke nodded. It was a gesture she had expected, but still, it was a humbling one. She had seen the Zorethians grow from a race that had once viewed the humans with suspicion to a people who now considered them equals, friends, and allies. I'll be there, she said. Let's make sure the rest of the crew knows. The ceremony was to take place that evening. As the sun set on Zoreth, the sky turned a brilliant orange, casting a warm glow over the gathered crowd. Zorethian leaders, including Tyra, stood at the front, while humans and Zorethians alike filled the space, awaiting the ceremony. Flags of both species fluttered in the breeze, a symbol of the unity that had been forged in the heat of battle. When the ceremony began, Tyra stepped forward, her voice clear and full of pride. Today, we honor those who fought for our freedom, those who gave their lives to ensure that Zoreth would remain free, and those who fought alongside us, humans who showed us what true bravery is. She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd before resting on Captain Burke. To Captain Burke and her crew, we owe everything. Your courage has saved us. Your strength has carried us. And your friendship is something we will never forget. There was a moment of silence before the crowd erupted in applause. Burke, standing with her crew, felt a lump form in her throat. She had never wanted to be a hero. She had only wanted to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. But standing there, receiving the gratitude of an entire species. She felt a deep sense of pride and humility. Tyra stepped down from the podium, and as she approached Captain Burke, she offered her a hand. "Thank you," Tyra said softly. "You've given us more than just victory. You've given us hope." Burke shook Tyra's hand, her own voice thick with emotion. "It was all of us together. We did this together." And that was the true victory, the victory of unity, of working together for a common goal. The battle had been won, but the real work was just beginning. The rebuilding, the healing, and the growing of their bond. It would take time, but Captain Burke knew one thing for certain. The future of Zoreth and humanity was bright. As the ceremony continued and the stars began to shine above, Burke looked up, a quiet smile on her face. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that, maybe, just maybe, peace was possible. The days following the ceremony were filled with progress. Zoreth's cities began to show signs of life once again. The rubble from the war was cleared, and new buildings rose from the dust. Humans and Zorethians worked side by side, rebuilding not just structures, but the very fabric of their societies. It was clear to all that the war had left deep scars, but the healing process had already begun. Captain Burke and her crew remained on Zoreth, not just as allies, but as partners in this new journey. The bond between the two species had solidified in the face of adversity, and now they were committed to ensuring that peace would not be temporary. The galaxy had once turned its back on Zoreth, but humanity had not. That was something they would never forget. As the rebuilding continued, Tyra and Burke sat in a quiet room in the newly restored council hall. The two women, once leaders of their own worlds, now shared a common purpose. Tyra looked out the window at the bustling city, her expression thoughtful. "We've come a long way," she said, her voice soft. "I remember when I first met you and your crew. I didn't know what to expect. You were strangers, aliens to us. But now, you're family." Burke smiled, her eyes reflecting the same thoughtfulness. "It's strange, isn't it, how a war can bring two worlds together? But sometimes that's what it takes to realize we're not so different after all." Tyra nodded. "I've learned so much from you, Captain. From your people. Zoreth is stronger now because of what we shared. I can see a future where we are not just allies in battle, but in life, where our children grow up knowing the value of friendship, of peace." Burke leaned back in her chair, considering Tyra's words. "I agree. The war may have brought us together, but it's the work we do now that will shape the future. We can't just fight together. We have to live together, build together, and grow together. That's what will make this alliance last." The two women shared a moment of silence, each lost in their thoughts of what had been accomplished and what was still to come. The future was uncertain, but they were no longer facing it alone. Together, they could face anything. Outside the council hall, life on Zoreth was returning to normal. The once war-torn streets were now filled with the sounds of laughter, conversation, and children playing. Zorethians and humans alike walked together, shared meals, and exchanged stories. There was an undeniable sense of unity in the air, a sense that something new was being born, a new era of peace and cooperation. That afternoon, a delegation of Zorethian and human leaders gathered in the central square. It was a symbolic moment, the first official agreement of their new alliance. The treaty, a document that would ensure mutual defense, trade, and cultural exchange, was signed in front of the people. The ceremony was simple but filled with meaning. Burke and Tyra stood side by side as the treaty was presented to the crowd, the two species united in their commitment to a shared future. As Burke signed her name, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was more than just a piece of paper. It was a symbol of everything they had fought for, the lives they had saved, the battles they had won, and the trust they had built. It was the beginning of something lasting. After the ceremony, Tyra turned to Burke with a smile. "This is only the beginning," she said. "There is so much more to do, So many worlds to explore, so many challenges to face. But together, I know we can do anything. Burke nodded, her eyes gleaming with determination. We've already proven that, and I'm not going anywhere. As they walked through the square, surrounded by their people, Burke couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The war was over, but their journey was just beginning. They had saved Zoreth, but now they had to ensure it, and all of the galaxy was safe from future threats. The Zorethian people had once believed they were alone in the universe, abandoned by all others. But now, they knew they were not. They had allies in humanity, a species that had proven that even in the darkest times, there was hope, and together, they would face whatever the future held. The stars above shone brightly as the two species celebrated their new partnership, and though the challenges of the galaxy were far from over, for the first time in a long time, they could face the future with hope. The bond between Zorethians and humans had been forged in the fires of war, but it would endure in the peace they were now building together. As Captain Burke stood beside Tyra, watching the people of Zoreth celebrate, she couldn't help but smile. The galaxy had once abandoned them, but humanity had stood by their side. And that, she realized, was the greatest victory of all.